Welcome to David and David on Real Estate. Join us as we explore the ins and outs of the real estate market.
All right, good morning. Welcome to the David podcast. And David, what a hot market out there it is. And I wanted to take a few minutes and just throw some statistics at you guys. And I think these numbers are going to really shed some light as to exactly what's happening at our market out there. And they're really, really mind-boggling, David.
Yeah, well, it's a great idea because it's when a market's hot like this and it's an unusual market, everybody likes to know what they're getting into. So I'm anxious to hear the market research that you've done, David.
So the average price in Toronto in the month of March has been $1,158,000. But when you break that number down and you start talking about specific classes of property type, the numbers get even more overwhelming. So check this out. For condominiums, the average sale price for a condo apartment is $707,000 in the month of March of 2021.
Wow.
Townhouses are $1.2 million. Semis are 1.3. But this is where it gets really interesting. The average sales price for a detached home in Toronto was $1,750,000.
It's unbelievable. If we were doing this podcast 5 years ago, the numbers would be so different. 8 years ago, the numbers would be maybe 50% of what these numbers are. And it's unbelievable. It's just everybody wants to live in the GTA, and that's part of what's driving this.
I think the biggest mistake that everybody made was to sell real estate, right? Like, I mean, every single time you sold real estate in the last 15 years, you made a mistake. It was the biggest mistake of your life. I was talking to one of our agents, Paul Mashlanka, the other day, and Paul was telling me, he was sitting there at the computer shaking his head. And I walked by and I said, Paul, what's going on? He said to me, my God, I can't believe the sixplex that just sold in Etobicoke. And I said, okay, well, talk to me, what's going on? He's like, well, I actually owned that sixplex about 6-7 years ago. He's like, it was my property and I sold it. And, I made good money, but it's selling for triple the price that I sold it. And he was shaking his head. He's like, David, if only I told you how many properties I sold. And if I just kept those properties today, my net worth would be astronomically higher. And I think everybody listening to us today can relate in some way or form. And I think that's what's driving our inventory levels today.
Yeah, I agree with that. The problem is for most of us mere mortals, they're not always in position to to buy and hold and collect an inventory. Those that can, it's a great investment. There's most of the clients that we deal with, it's getting all their money together to buy their home. They're focusing on a purchase for their home. It's where they're going to live, and they can't look at it quite the same way because whatever they're selling right now, even though they're doing really well, they got to buy something too, and the prices are just been going so high. But they've got to live somewhere, so they have to treat it as their home. It's an investment. It's always going to be a good investment, but it's their home. For those that can look at it as purely investment and get that second property, then they're away to the races. That's for sure.
100%. And there's ways to take equity out of your home and reinvest and jump back into the market. And you really have to talk to a really good professional, sit down, make a plan, but there's definitely ways to do it. And remember, the best time to buy real estate was always yesterday. Looking at some statistics, let's jump into Oakville because I think there's some really interesting things happening in Oakville. Remember, the average sale price for a detached home in Toronto was $1.750 for the month of March. David, let me ask you this question. What do you think is the average sale price of a detached home in Oakville for the same time period?
In Oakville, it's got to be something pretty close. Parts of Oakville are going to be higher. You get closer to the lake.
Do you think it's higher than Toronto, or do you think it's lower?
I think parts near the lake, I'm guessing, are going to be higher. And other parts are going to be pretty competitive with Toronto.
Okay, so we're talking about the whole city as a whole, right? Breaking down the numbers. The average sale price for a detached home in Oakville in the month of March, and we're talking about the whole of Oakville,
Mhm.
right? $1,876,000, $116,000 higher than Toronto, which um, I mean, I'm just absolutely shocked.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people that love that area and love being closer to the lake. And the further you get like to the lake, the more those prices have just skyrocketed as well. And and these days, people don't mind the commute if they're working in Toronto. From Oakville, it's not a bad commute, but right now people are working from home anyways, and so they rather have the space, and they'll get more space if they're living out in Oakville than they will in the heart of the city. I'm talking about outdoor space.
Yeah, I'm totally. I think you hit the nail on the head, David. I think people, this is an indicator that people are moving out of the city and people are placing more value on quality of life, outdoor space. Oakville has some beautiful parks, right? Some of the best and top-rated schools. I mean, 50 of the top CEOs in Canada reside in Oakville. It's just a great place to live in. But I think that indicator is indicative of some of the trends that we're seeing where people are moving out of the large urban areas and they're looking for quieter, smaller places to live in.
Yeah, there's still a strong market in the condo market, but we're definitely seeing with our clients a desire to get out of some of the smaller condos, and then they're getting into the semis in the heart of the city and things like that. And the prices on the semis and the townhouses have gone crazy, but it just gives people a little more space. And now they've got a little backyard, so they have some outdoor space. And we're seeing some of our clients, paying $1 million, 2 million, 3 for a semi, which is unbelievable. But they want to get into that space, and that's a stepping stone to them getting into the detached home. And but people are looking for a little more outdoor leisure space right now. It's
One,
something that's really taken off in the last year.
100%. And I think we're seeing the trends of that in a big way, like we've never seen before. And it seems like the further you go from the downtown core, like markets like Cambridge and Kitchener and St. Catharines, the more multiple offers that you're seeing in the marketplace, people are just competing in a big way for properties out there.
Yeah, and looks like it's going to continue. It's not slowing down right now. Those trends are continuing. Government's looking into ways to try and slow down the real estate market, but it's there's a real estate market and there's the real estate market in the GTA, and it's different in the GTA historically than it's been across all of Canada. You've probably seen in all the years you've been doing this, David. When there's been slumps in real estate elsewhere in Canada, elsewhere in the US, in the world in general, somehow the GTA is bulletproof for those slumps because there's such a demand by the just nature of our society, just a desire of people to want to live in the GTA. Now that area is expanding gradually, but it's still just a hot market. Even in the worst of real estate conditions, the market stays hot. It seems like the prices are never significantly going down. It might slow the increase, but they never significantly go down in the GTA.
Yeah, and I think it's for good reason, David. I mean, like, I've traveled the world. I've been to different countries, different continents, and um, I can't see myself raising my son and raising a family in any other country in the world. I mean, something as basic as the clean air that we breathe and the clean water that we have, right? It's hard to find that in the rest of the world, right? And I think everybody worldwide wants to reside in Canada and sees the benefits of our economy and our social system and our healthcare, right? And even take a look at our immigration policy, right? I mean, it's vastly different from what they're doing in the States, but with the point system that we have, Canada's letting in a lot of business owners, a lot of physicians, a lot of engineers, a lot of lawyers, and these are established professionals that are coming in from other parts of the world, from upper middle classes, with a substantial net worth already, And on day one, they're investing in our real estate market. They're buying real estate and they're buying franchises and they're starting businesses and they're contributing in a really big way to our economy from day one.
Yeah, that's so true. And then once they're here, they're not leaving. They're moving. They're not moving somewhere else. And then they're raising children, and the children want to stay. It's not like even if they go off somewhere to university, they come back to the GTA. So now you've got to find a way to get those kids as they grow up and become adult children, just like I have. And I'm fortunate all three of my adult children never thought about leaving the GTA. And then the challenge for them is to find a place to live in the GTA and fit that within their budgets as they're starting out in the world, in the business world, and then having families. And that's why the GTA sort of expands to different areas. And there's a good, strong condo market, which is a good starter place for a lot of young people. But it's an expensive place to live. But there's a real desire for people once they're here, they don't want to leave and go elsewhere. Oh yeah, I can go out west somewhere and I could buy a house for a lot less money, or move way up north and buy a house for a lot less money, even in Ontario. But they want the GTA. There's something very attractive about living here.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, historically, anybody that has moved outside of the GTA, it has been extremely hard for them to move back because the GTA has always appreciated at a much faster rate than anywhere around it. And now what we're seeing is the areas around the GTA are catching up slowly, right? So we're seeing double-digit appreciations in neighborhoods outside of GTA. And COVID to a large degree has been a trend that has helped in that regards. But the market here is extremely hot, and I think it's going to continue to be extremely hot for all the reasons that we described. But David, one thing I'm sure is, I wouldn't want to be a first-time buyer right now in this market because it'd be extremely, extremely difficult.
Well, it is difficult the first time, but I would encourage anybody that's thinking about it as a first time to get in there. You got to get in at some point. The sooner you get in, the better. There are some incentives that do assist you a little bit as a first time buyer, like you get a break on land transfer tax, and that's helpful. So I would encourage anybody to buy whatever you can reasonably afford to buy, and no matter what you're buying the first time, you're never going to think you're going to be able to afford it, but somehow everybody does, and you find a way to do it. But the sooner you get in on the market, the better, and take advantage of the available programs that do give you a bit of a break as a first timer, and get in there. Even it's the smallest thing, even if it's a small condo, and then a few years down the road, you'll move from there to the next one. And if it takes you 2 or 3 moves to get into the one you really want, at least you've gotten in, and you've gotten in on the market at some point in time.
1000%. Our real estate is all about stepping stones. You have to start somewhere. And I think builders nowadays more than ever are building smaller products. There's condo townhouses, there's stackable townhouses, there's smaller footprints, right? And these products are designed to help the first-time home buyers get into the market. So definitely don't wait. Get pre-approved, right? Really educate yourself about what our market is doing, about home inspections, about conditions, about agreements of purchase and sales. Know exactly what you can afford, and talk to a professional and jump into the market, because the sooner you make that jump, the sooner you're going to start building wealth, the sooner you're going to start living somewhere where your product is appreciating, you're building wealth, and you can start looking at other options a couple of years down the line and start working towards that dream home that everybody wants.
Well, that's good advice for anybody. And I think one of the keys you said is, get a professional on your team. And that's so important to have someone. And I'm really referring to someone in your industry as a real estate professional, a realtor, that can help guide you through the process. And that professional is going to help get you the rest of the team that you're going to need to get a proper mortgage broker in place, to have someone that can do a home inspection, to have a proper legal team. Obviously, you're going to refer everybody to my office, but you've got to have that that team built, and the person that's generally starting to build that team for you is your real estate agent, and they'll help guide you through the process and what's available, and in all aspects of it. Even like you mentioned, the mortgage approval process. We've got clients that we find get in trouble because they think they've been pre-approved for a mortgage, and all they got is a piece of paper from their bank saying, yeah, we pre-approved you for a mortgage up to a certain amount. But then on page 2, there's a list of conditions. And when you go through all the conditions and everything, they've really been approved for nothing because they've got to comply with all those things. So they need, especially a first timer, will need that proper guidance to make sure that they're really kept on track and surrounded by the right professional assistance.
Absolutely. And my biggest advice there is don't take the word of your mortgage broker at face value. Make sure you submit your pay stubs. Make sure you submit your notices of assessments. Make sure you go through the process and obtain an employment letter and submit all that documents. Let your mortgage agent review all of it. Make sure that you remove as many of those conditional items in your pre-approval as possible, so that you know exactly where you stand, you know exactly what you can afford, and you're comfortable, right? Because we are seeing a really hot market out there. Things are selling in multiples, especially in the lower price range. So you have to be comfortable and confident when you're going in and when you're making an offer on a place. And it's going to help you win in some of those multiple offer situations.
Well, that's the biggest issue that I think we're finding right now, is that we're in this unique market where we've been there a few times in the past a number of years, but right now that's the thing that's really unique about this market, that we're in this multi-offer, multi-bidding scenario, which puts a lot of pressure on buyers. Makes you guys in the real estate industry work really hard because you're running people around, and because they're not getting every offer, every house, because they're coming, 15, 20 offers coming in on a lot of houses. We're hearing these stories every single day. So it creates unique challenges for real estate agents. It creates unique challenges for us in the legal profession as well, to help clients through that process.
100%.
What do you tell your clients when they, about inspections and financing conditions that you would normally want to put into an agreement of purchase and sale?
David, it's a very challenging environment out there. I have a home inspector who is I'm very close with. He was one of my original mentors in the industry, kind of took me under his wing about 16 years ago and really showed me the ropes. And there was a period of time where over a 9-month period, he just didn't do any home inspections. There wasn't even one offer being submitted with a home inspection condition. And that presents a lot of challenges for all parties involved, right? I mean, our aim in the real estate profession is that the buyer is extremely well educated and that the seller is protected, right? And a home inspection, to a large degree, accomplishes that. It brings to light all the issues in the home, and then we can address it. We have the team, we have the professionals to address any type of issues that are thrown at us when we're buying a home, whether they're structural issues, whether they're window issues, whether they're furnace issues. We have a team of people that can address any issue that we find. But the problem is we need to find those issues to be able to address them. There's no worse situation that happens when a buyer purchases a property and then there's some sort of unknown issue that they're presented with. They're already paying record high prices for the house. If there's issues on top that they're not aware of, sometimes it can be extremely difficult and frustrating to have the financial means to be able to address those issues after the fact.
Well, look, as a legal advisor, I would never tell a client to enter into an agreement of purchase and sale without a condition for an inspection. Okay, but we live in the real world too, and we have to be practical in our advice too. So my role is to make sure they understand their rights and what happens if they don't have one. But there are some practical solutions around that, and I would advise anybody that's selling a property in a market where they're expecting multi-offers and they won't want to accept conditions on inspection, get an inspection done at the seller's cost, have a pre-inspection done. So anybody that's interested, you can present them with an inspection, and it's got to be from a reliable inspector, a licensed inspector who knows what they're doing, so they're not handing over a piece of garbage. And that way, potential buyers at least have an inspection when they're coming in before they do their offers. Now, then on the buyer side, I got to caution buyers, because they can't necessarily rely on that inspection report. If they end up being the successful bidder and buy it, and it turns out the inspector made a mistake, and something comes up after closing, they can't go back and sue that inspector for, for making that mistake, unless whoever did that inspection allows them to do that and gives them what we refer to as a transmittal letter, something that allows them to rely on the inspection report the same way that the seller could, because the seller is the one that actually paid for the report. But that's one way that facilitates potential buyers not going in quite as blind when they're making their offer.
Yeah, and David, that's actually really good advice for any agents out there that are representing buyers where the seller has done a pre-inspection report. Make sure that you put some sort of a clause in the offer that transfers their report to the new buyer and lets the buyer rely on the previous report. And there's maybe some sort of a warranty representation that the seller sort of represents that this is accurate and it's been done correctly, and the buyer can rely on it.
Yeah, that's crucial. We're seeing same type of issue. I guess, David, you're seeing it too. When on the condo market, people putting multi offers in, and they're not conditional upon reviewing a status certificate. And again, as a legal professional, we would never advise a client to put an unconditional offer without reviewing a status certificate. And you would be giving the same advice as a reputable real estate agent. But there's a similar way around that, and that's, we review the status certificates before the offers are submitted.
And just for everybody listening, status certificate talks about the health of the building, talks about stuff like lawsuits, bylaws, talks about the reserve fund steady. So when you're buying a condo unit, not only are you buying the actual apartment and an interest in that apartment, but you're also buying into the health of the building, right? So you want to make sure that, and this is crucially important and affects value in a big way, you want to make sure that the building has a healthy reserve fund. Reserve fund is for things like roof, windows, garage, any major building issues that need to be addressed and maintained over the years. If the building doesn't have an adequate reserve fund, and let's say the windows need to be replaced, then the board of directors can do a special assessment and can assess an extra monetary value over and above the monthly maintenance fees, where the homeowners would be responsible, and that can be done in a one lump sum payment or over a monthly basis. But super important, and it affects value in a big way to make sure that the building that you're buying in is healthy.
And it's crucial. Some people don't appreciate how important it is to review a status certificate, and they're not aware that the status certificate is not just a 3 or 4 page document that we receive that says status certificate on it. It includes all of the condominium's dockets, all their bylaws and rules and regulations, and their declaration that creates the condominium, how the condominium is operated. Like you said, the reserve funds study is part of it. The budget, the annual budget that determines your monthly common expenses or maintenance fees, it's all part of it. We have to confirm all that. In the old days, when we used to receive a status certificate, it was about 5-6 inches worth of paper. I used to, kid around that we should charge clients by the pound to review these things, because it's a lot to review. It takes quite a bit of time. We, as lawyers, sometimes we spend more time reviewing a status certificate than we do on closing the transaction, looking for all these issues. Now we get it electronically, so it's a good thing we're not charging by the pound for reviewing it. But it's important that it be reviewed. So we're in a market like this. If we have to put an unconditional offer in, then we want to get the status certificate before the offer is submitted, and we review it. And the lawyers in my office the last number of weeks have been just inundated with these type of requests, and on short notice. We're putting an offer at 8 o'clock tonight. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Can you quickly review this status certificate? Unfortunately, we can never quickly do it because it takes a while to go through these things, but we're scrambling to get it done so they can go in with peace of mind and make an offer that's unconditional.
Yeah. And David, I mean, it's really easy to get caught up in this whole multiple offer hype. I want this apartment. It's a great apartment. There's 6 other offers. Let's get into it. But, sometimes this is the biggest transaction for a lot of people's lives, right? And you do sometimes have to take a step back, and make sure that you're protected, and review these things and ask these questions and go through the motions.
Yeah, it's important. That's why you've got to be surrounded by the right people. You got to have the right team in place that can help guide you through this. I'm surprised, we do get some offers come into accept agreements of purchase and sale, like on a condo, as we're talking about. And I say, where's the status certificate? Because we didn't review it. Did somebody else review it? And the answer we're getting back from some is no, we didn't get a chance to do it, so we're taking our chances. And now we're reviewing the status certificate after they've got a firm deal. We can't go back to the seller. We have no recourse to go. We've got to close the transaction with whatever we have. And now we've got to show that status certificate to the lender, and the lender may not be happy with it, and that could create an issue for getting the mortgage funds for closing. So, there are some agents out there that are not doing it properly. It's not people coming from your brokerage, because you guys are having these type of sessions all the time and they understand it. But I do see that in the industry where people are taking those shortcuts. They're so anxious to get that property, and they're not thinking through the whole process.
Right. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast together, is because, we do want to educate people, and we do want to raise the bar in the real estate market. So David, let's talk about home inspection conditions. I mean, we are in a hot market where, everything is selling in multiples, and the least conditions that you have in your offer, the better it looks for the seller, and the higher the chances are of that offer going through and you being successful in purchasing a home. But what are some of the legal pitfalls of not including home inspection conditions?
Well, you're basically going in blind. You're going to take the property as is, where is, and whatever's discovered after closing is generally going to be something that the buyer's going to have to deal with, because they're not going to have recourse back against a seller, unless a seller deliberately hid something, like knew about a defect and deliberately covered it up, so any buyer just walking through a property you would not notice it. And even if they had an inspection, they may not be able to see it, because an inspection doesn't give you the rights to start opening up walls and things like that. So, but inspectors can see signs of things, but if they're in there. But other than that, the buyer's on their own. So they're buying what they see, and they're taking it as is, where is, and they've got to hope that they're not going to have serious issues, because most people are scrambling to stretch to buy the most they can buy for their money. And it's very disheartening for people after closing to find out there's a bunch of things that have to be fixed in the property, and they don't have the budget for it, because these are surprises. So that's the risk.
We actually encourage all our buyers, if they're involved in a multiple offer situation, to do a home inspection before the multiple offer presentation date. That way, it really gives you more confidence. If the house is solid, if it's clean, if there's no issues, you're that much more confident about putting your best foot forward, and possibly offering a little bit more money, because you're not buying any headaches that are coming along with the house, and you just feel more comfortable about proceeding forward. So we always encourage people or buyers to do an inspection before submitting an offer an offer on a property, before the offer presentation date.
No, if the seller has an inspection where they can rely on, like we talked about before, that's great. If not, if there's an opportunity for them to have their own inspector go in and do it, that's great. The cost of inspections are not that high. It's worthwhile doing. And sometimes they're going to get the inspection, they're going to decide they're not going to even put the offer in, and move on to the next one. And then they'll pay for an inspection on that. But it's money well spent. It's better than going in blindly on any property, for sure.
Now, I do want to talk to you about one situation. If you're a homeowner and you have your house positioned for a multiple offer situation, and a co-op agent who has a buyer says to you, hey, listen, I want to get a home inspection done, and they do a home inspection and they find an issue that you were not aware of as a homeowner. What are some of the legal ramifications of now having the need to disclose that issue to other potential buyers, and it possibly adversely affecting the sale price that you're going to get on your home?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, but it really depends on what the issues are. If it's something that would be apparent to anybody else going into the home, it's not something that you have to disclose. Again, a homeowner's got to be careful. First, you have a right to repair your home. Okay, if something goes wrong, and if you repair it, you don't have an obligation to disclose it. Even if it was, oh, you had a flood at 10 years ago, and then you fixed it at some point, you don't have an obligation to disclose that you had a flood at some point, or you had a fire in the kitchen 15 years ago, and then you fixed it all up. You don't have a duty to disclose something like that, but you do have disclosure obligations in terms of not hiding things. So if something has not been fixed properly and you're sort of masking it or doing a Band-Aid over it so that someone wouldn't see it, that changes what a legal obligation would be. So a lot of times a question of fact and a question of what they do. So they got to be careful about it. And everybody wants to present their house in the best light and put a fresh coat of paint on and things like that. But they got to be careful if there was a flood coming up through a place in the basement and they just start putting carpets over it so no one would see that, without poking through or ripping up the carpet and see all the water stains and things like that. Then eventually when it does come to light, they would be responsible for that.
100%. There's a difference between repairing the issue, taking care of it, addressing it, and hiding it, keeping it under the rugs. And a lot of the times when sellers do put a house for sale, it's easy to get caught up in that. Well, you know what, I'm selling the house, but the best practice is always to repair it, make sure it's done by a professional, make sure you have the invoices that substantiate and show that the repair was done, try to get a warranty wherever possible. And when you do everything and everything is repaired properly, you no longer have that necessity to disclose that situation because it's been rectified.
Yeah, and that's a great point with getting a warranty. And just like we talked about an inspection report, if you can get the inspector to allow the future buyer to rely on that inspection report, the same principle goes with a guarantee or warranty that you get from any licensed trade. You should be asking them, can the subsequent buyer rely on this warranty as well? Because if they can, and it might be for a 90-day warranty or a 120-day warranty or a year warranty, whatever it is, that adds value to what you're offering a potential buyer. Like, here's an issue, we fixed it. It was fixed by a professional, but not only that, you can rely on this warranty if something goes wrong during this guarantee period.
100%. And I think it again goes back to the fact of make sure you hire a professional, make sure it's a reputable company that's been in business for a long time, that's fully insured, that has a solid name. Check Google reviews, make sure they have a solid reputation, and make sure that it's a company that you and your clients would want to do business with.
Yeah, and that's another area that you as a real estate agent adds value to your client, because you would help give them some guidance and have a network of contractors that potentially they can tap into that you've experienced before. And a lot of times it's a starting place. Can't always get everybody because people are busy right now. I'll tell you, that's a good industry to be in right now. If you're in the home repair industry, everybody seems to be swamped because people during COVID are discovering the little flaws or the little annoying things in their own homes and want everything fixed and are doing it. So those trades are tough to get right now. So if you get some guidance from your real estate agent, that helps too.
Well, I think people are really connecting with their home in a large way, right? People are spending 24 hours, 7 days a week. They're working out of their home. So the connection with the home has never been greater. And I think that leads to, a lot of home repair projects happening. But it also, that is also part of the reasons that's fueling our heart market right now, is people are realizing that, hey, you know what, I want a swimming pool, or you know what, I'm spending so much time at my kitchen table on my laptop that I don't want to have neighbors in the back that are looking in through my window. And other people are realizing that their home is too small, right? That the kids running around the main floor is interfering with their home office, and they're looking for different solutions. So people are looking, and people are connecting with the home now more than ever before.
Yeah, it makes for a very interesting market, which is, and it's great that, when you and I have these discussions all the time, and it's great because the way we see it from a little bit of a different point of view, because, we're in the same general industry, but we're dealing with it from a different side of it. You're guiding people through all these variables, and I sort of get consulted when there's an issue, and what are my rights. And it makes for interesting times and interesting conversations to have. So it's, I welcome these opportunities. Even if we weren't doing a podcast, it's always great to have these discussions.
Yeah, whenever you and I get on the phone, it's never a short conversation, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So David, let's quickly touch on financing conditions. Again, I mean, people are removing these finance conditions, and we're seeing it backfire, especially when houses don't appraise at a certain value. And let's talk about some legal pitfalls surrounding financing conditions.
Yeah, well, a simple example would be, let's say someone is buying, one of these, $800,000 semi, that's on the market for that. And then there's multi offers coming in. And let's say they've been approved. They've got some sort of confirmation, they're pre-approved to either lend them 70% of the value, and they're looking in roughly to spend about $800,000. So they're, on it. But all of a sudden there's a bidding war, and they end up buying that property for $1 million. And we're seeing this all the time. So they go back to their lender and they're saying, okay, you were going to give me 70% of $800,000 before, but it turns out I bought a property that's $1 million, and I still want 70% of the $1 million. And the bank is going to say, well, you didn't read what the pre-approval condition was. One of the main conditions is subject to an appraiser. And they send out their appraiser, and the appraiser says, no, this semi is really worth 800,000 in most markets. Right now, they ended up buying it for $1 million, but we're not accepting the $1 million as the value. So we're only going to give them 70% of the 800,000. So they're going to get 560,000, but they need 700,000 to close the deal. Where are they going to make up that $140,000? Okay, because these pre-approvals are almost 100% of the time they're conditional on an appraiser. And these days, appraisers are not accepting the purchase price negotiated between a buyer and a seller as the value. At one point in time, different markets, that was the best indicator of the value. So, what do you do as an agent when you're guiding someone through a property like this, and you're saying, there was sort of in the $800,000 market, and all of a sudden they stretched to buy a property that cost them $1 million?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is take the emotions out of it, and then you have to rely on fundamentals. So location, location, location. You have to look at things like square footage, number of bathrooms. You have to look at neighborhood and community where you're buying. And you have to have the proper advice from a professional real estate agent guiding you every step of the way, because it's tough out there. It's really tough out there, and you need great advice to help you navigate. There's a lot of aspects to buying a property, making sure that you buy something that does have future appreciation value. So if you are buying something that's a stepping stone, in 3-4 years, a property does appreciate, and appreciates fairly quickly, so you can move on to your next property and get the most sort of equity out of your property. There's a lot of aspects to buying real estate, but it is exciting out there, David. As challenging as it is, it's extremely exciting. We are seeing the number of first-time home buyers coming into the market astronomical numbers of first-time home buyers buying, right? Which, I mean, gives confidence to our market. But again, it's there's a lot of tough decisions to be made, and you have to make the right decisions.
Yeah, that's crucial, and you got to be careful. You know, like you said, a first-time buyer, you'd love to buy a property that you're going to get the benefit of the appreciated value. The danger in the current market, when you get into these bidding wars, is that appreciated value is being paid for right up front to some extent. So they're going to have to be patient for the next bump, you know, for that property that not long ago was fair market value at 800,000, all of a sudden selling for $1 million right now. How long is it going to take for that property to be $1.2 million? You know, it's surprising that it might get there faster than we all think, but you got to be careful. And people that do get pre-approved have to make sure that they look to see what that means, because it's dangerous to not have a financing condition in an offer on the basis that they think they've been pre-approved. And yes, and the lender will say, yeah, I'm going to give you money, but they're not going to give them as much money as they need to close that property based on the appraised value. So they got to be very careful and have proper advice along the way.
Absolutely. And well, the last thought for today is that the highest offer doesn't always win, right? And I wrote that down because,
Yeah.
you know, I really wanted to get the point across that, you know, a lot of what happens here, like you have to remember a home, when a seller's selling a home, a lot of the times it's, you know, there's an emotional connection to that house, right? So is the number important? Absolutely. The number is probably one of the most important factors, right? But this is where those, you know, that person's kids grew up. This is where maybe a baby was born. You're still dealing with a certain set of emotions. So cultivating relationships, you know, don't just focus on the number and the offer. Make sure that the seller knows who you are. Write a letter, include a picture, tell them why you want to buy their home. Tell them, you know, if there's furniture in the house that you like, or if there's a piece of art that's in the house. Tell them, hey, you know, this stood out for me. This is why we're here today. This is why we want to buy your house. You know, this is what we're envisioning for your property. This is how my family's going to enjoy this house, and personalize your offer, right? Because sometimes if there's a small difference between you and the next higher offer, if I'm a seller and my son was born there, and you know, we've built memories there, and I love the house and I'm emotionally connected to it as a seller, I want my house to be sold to the right family, right? So the highest offer doesn't always win. And again, it comes down to having the right representation, professional representation that can express that. And you know, I've been a lot of offer presentations representing both sides, and I've seen so many agents, you know, put on offer on the kitchen counter table and solely talk about the number, right? This is what my buyer's pre-approved at. This is the number. You know what? The number is important, but I think personalizing the buyer and like really speaking to the emotional connection of the home is so important as well.
Well, you know, I think that's fabulous, David, because that's the type of thinking that separates you and your brokerage from some others that I see in the industry. You've got to be thinking out of the box a little bit like that, and you got to be thinking some of the practicalities, and it's not, like you said, it's not always about the numbers. We look at it another way too, because one of the most important things to a seller would be, I want to make sure that whoever's buying this has an ability to close. So it's sort of pre-approving, you know, who your buyers are and getting information on them, because they'd rather sell it to someone that has that has demonstrated an ability to actually close the transaction. We've seen too many over the years where, you know, the highest bidder, you know, got it, but the highest bidder couldn't close it because they couldn't get their financing together. And then the seller's got to sell it again. So that's not a good situation for any seller to be in. So that's part of the scenario. The more that the parties can get together and understand who they are, and a buyer, you got a buyer that you understand on a personal level why this house would be important to them, and then you're satisfied they've done all their homework and they've got an ability to close. That is huge for a seller as well.
100%.
Seller's point of view.
And what's the best indicator of that? I say it's always the deposit amount, right? Like if you have two offers in front of you,
Yeah.
One's conditional and financing and has a $20,000 deposit, and one's unconditional and has a $150,000 deposit. Obviously,
Right.
the person that's bringing $150,000 to the table has already demonstrated a much larger financial capacity. Now, there's never that guarantee, right? But you have to read between the lines.
Right. And people are not going to walk away from $150,000 very easily without a fight. $20,000, not to be frivolous about it, people don't want to walk away from that either. But it's a whole different scenario if they have to walk away from $20,000. It's not nearly the commitment, and there's a lot more certainty when someone comes in with a good, strong deposit. And they can also demonstrate to you that they've got an ability to close. And you, as a seller's agent, you'd want to see that they've got some sort of pre-approval or get confirmation that they qualify. It's an important role of a selling agent to try and pre-qualify buyers as well.
Awesome. Well, David, listen, I look forward to our next podcast. We're going to peel back a lot more layers. We're going to go into a lot more depth about some of these hot topics that we're talking about. Buy real estate. Remember, the best time to buy real estate was yesterday. It is a challenging market out there, but it's exciting. Hire the right professionals, talk to the right professionals, get educated, and jump in.
Well, I look forward to the next one. This was fun, David. It's always great talking to you, and I look forward to getting together for our next podcast.
Awesome, David. Talk to you then.
Thanks. Take care.